Already over 9,000 euro in donations for Ecosia. If you haven't done so, please head to projectacom/Ecosia and donate. I am. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you the panel on impacting organizations through data. For us, making a company data-driven is usually not a challenge of technology. For us, it's making sure that the organization uses the data that it has to grow and improve its business. And I'm very happy that we managed to assemble a very qualified cast of people to talk on this topic. So please welcome to the stage Melissa from Blinkist, Simon from Spryker, Florian from Scout24, and Zara from Opinary. She will also moderate this panel. Give them a warm applause.
Hi everyone, welcome. After this very long lunch break, I hope we're energized. As was said, the name of this panel is Impacting Organizations Through Data, and I have to say that when I got the title, I was like, this could mean anything. Like, what would this be about? So I've tried to focus the questions, and I think we'll have a good conversation today about what does it mean to take what are sometimes these huge unstructured data sets and actually turn them into something that you can use to make a real decision, right? Because all we really want now is data-driven decisions. So we'll try to detangle what does that even mean and how can we get there. So I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, starting with Melissa.
Hello, I'm leading the business intelligence efforts at Blinkist. Blinkist is a subscription-based mobile app that does 15 minutes summaries of nonfiction books in both text and audio. And we are based in Berlin. Basically, the business intelligence at Blinkist deals with developing insights, basically doing descriptive analytics like dashboards and reports and ad hoc analysis, but in addition to that, also generating data products such as recommender models or predictors. So it's a mix of data science and data analysis. Yeah, that's basically it.
Very cool. And then Simon is next.
Yeah, hi. I'm Simon. I'm Director for People, Operations and Data at Spryker. Spryker is a commerce operating system. So we are building commerce operating systems for customers. And we want to equip the customers in order that they are able to do commerce in a very, very innovative way. We're around since almost 5 years, and the challenges we are facing in BI or in data, to put it more general, are not about mastering the sheer masses of B2C companies, but figuring out patterns in a B2B environment, and that's very challenging and a lot of fun.
Very cool. And then
hi, my name is Florian. I'm in data for 12 years. Spent quite a lot of time with Vodafone, where I led an analyst team. And then last year moved over to Scout24, where I'm leading also an analyst team for our Scout24, Europe's leading marketplace for buying and selling cars.
And I'm Sarah Cooper. I work at Opinary. We're a Berlin-based startup that works with journalism tech. So we make a flash public opinion polling tool for online news that also serves as an ad space for publishers. And let's just get into it. I want to first ask, let's get a lay of the audience. How many of you here, raise your hand, if your job description has something to do with like getting insights from data? Yeah, everybody.
Nice.
It's like it's kind of a buzzword, and I think that we should just take a second before we dive into what this means or how we can do it better to understand how we got here. So Simon, can you talk us through what are the factors that led us to this point today where everybody wants data?
I think there are quite a lot of things that led us into that situation. First of all, and we just talked about it over lunch, only 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and in a lot of companies even today, people run around documenting things on paper. And what digitization, so the transition from analog to digital processes, helped us with is collecting that data in a very, very easy way. because you didn't have to think of the fact of documenting, but you get the data right away. And then there's a second factor that is that I think is very important, which is if you think of the companies that are most known for using data, think of the Googles and the Facebooks and the Ubers of today. Those companies didn't exist a couple of years back, and when they were founded, there was no competition around. Therefore, their main goal was to become better at what they're doing. So they were not able to benchmark. All they were able to do was make your internal processes better, make sure that you deliver to the customers faster, improve your conversion rates, improve your average deal sizes, improve your market reach. And all that was possible through data.
So you're saying that because these companies had the data available, there was no maybe like meta-analysis of what you should analyze, and then that just set the standard that we have to be analyzing everything then, basically. Melissa, do you have something else to add on that?
I mean, I treat data as a fuel. So we have machines, we have models, we have algorithms that run. And data basically works as an input to make them function better, more efficiently. And if we have more of it, we will use more of it, because that's what we want to do. It's business, we want to do it better. And the ability to generate data, store it and process it much more efficiently than before led to the craze level of decision making. The data-driven decision making was actually there since we moved from analog to digital. Like, for example, for marketing, you used to give an ad to a newspaper and then you looked at the newspaper sales numbers or something. Like, you couldn't track much more. But the moment you started to move things to digital, you just have more data. And recently, this data became much more granular. So while a decade ago, we were looking at if a marketing campaign is doing well or not, now we look at if a certain visual in a certain ad that's part of an ad set that belongs to a campaign that's running on a certain marketing channel in a certain country doing well. And like multiply that.
Yeah.
So the data is there and we want to optimize things. We can do it, we do it.
So this leads me to my next question, which I want to pose to Florian.
I mean, when we talk about data-drivenness, it always comes along with a crazy focus on the customer. I mean, we want to understand the customer, we want to know what he's doing, we want to try out things, and all we do as a customer is collecting and analyzing data. So when we do A/B testing, it's data. When we do crazy machine learning, it's data, and it's all about understanding the customer. And probably the second thing is we use data, or we are data crazy because we can. So there's data democratization, so data are available. Everything we do is data, so at least for Scout24. So we don't have a real product, we have a data product. It's not with BMW who can build cars without data, or probably not yet anymore, but still they can. But all we do is we having data. So and we make this data available, and we enable the company to also use and analyze the data.
Let's stay with that for a second. I want to ask you, based off of what you just said, with we can A/B test, we're working on the customer, like we have all these decisions that we want to make. I think that a word that gets used a lot is like actionable, right? Like what are actionable insights? But I have yet to have found a good definition for what that actually means. Like when you're doing all of these tests, when you're collecting all this data, do you have a North Star of what actionable means for you?
I mean, in older days we had this BI team which was centralized and then did all this analysis and creating insights, and then was the question, so how actionable are these insights? So how can I use the insights and use it for the business? We at Scout, we have a model where we send our analysts directly to the product teams. So they're working closely together with product teams, sitting together with them, they pair up with them. So they are close related to business. And when you talk about actionability, I would always say it's about impact for the business. So there's an immediate business measure or whatever, or it is adding value to the customer. So when you're creating a data product or a feature, should be immediately also impacting the customer.
So it's all about the immediate value that this one insight can add. Do you have a different perspective, Simon, or do you want to weigh in?
I think adding to what you said, it's all about context. So when you're talking about actionable insights, you have to provide the decision makers with a context. What do I mean by that? Context can be, how do I develop over time? So my reference point is 3 months ago, how was my business running? What was my pipeline value 3 months ago? But it can also be a benchmarking. So how does one sales team perform versus the other in terms of conversion rate? And that context gives you some guidance and some reference point where you can take decisions based upon, and where you can create best practices and derive them from data. And then you obviously have to make sure that this is getting into execution. So from those insights into execution, you need to provide people with the data, you need to allow the insights, you need to consult them on how to interpret the data, and you need to take decisions and, more important, actions.
Definitely. Melissa, you, as far as I understand, work also at building up data teams like from scratch with startups. How do you apply this theory of actionability if you don't even have other team members sometimes, or if you don't know what's been happening in the last quarter and how you can do better in this quarter? What do you use?
Yeah, it's been super difficult, especially in the case of Blinkist. When I joined, there was so many things that was already in place. Actually, the good thing, the company was very data conscious, data aware, so they had a data warehouse, they had a lot of dashboards, but it's much harder because then you have a whole company to take over from, to learn from, to catch up with. And what worked out in the end is to work in twofold. So you grow your data infrastructure, you bring it to a point where you have the capabilities to answer the data needs quickly. It's not going to take you ages to get a certain insight. You have data availability, you have tracking in place, whichever key insights are missing, you get pipelines in, you work with third-party companies to do it quickly because you need that ASAP. And then in the meantime, you also still get out the key insights. Maybe not the most efficient way because you are still working on the infrastructure, you have the fundamentals, but they need that to drive the business. So you don't want to turn down the enthusiasm. You still want to impact the business, but you also want to get your house in order.
Yeah.
And you just have to do it both ways. Saying no at the right time and really having a way of prioritizing requests, managing expectations, and really communicating this transparently.
This is a good question that I actually wanted to ask to all of the panelists, which is if you're in this scale-up phase, right? Like there's the starting phase where you're building something and then you have to scale it. And obviously you need your data to live outside of your data scientists, live outside of your data team. What are some strategies that you use? And especially, would you prefer to focus more on automation and on infrastructure? Or do you prefer on hiring more analysts or creating a culture of data evangelism in the company? Let's go back this way with Simon.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
So I think what you have to do is both, and I'm absolutely with Melissa on this, that you have to build up the infrastructure and you have to work on the analytics as well. And as Florian already mentioned, it's very, very important to be very close to the departments, because at the very end what you have to analyze is three different levels. You have data, but this data is coming from processes. And these processes are being generated by interactions, so people. And in order to understand the entire stack, you need to be very close to the people and talk to them and consult them. However, and I know this from our own experience, sometimes you have to build infrastructure, you have to invest, and the insights are lost along the way because you don't have time or the appropriate amount of resources to handle all those requests. And our best practice is to communicate a lot about the roadmap that you pursue in order to build the infrastructure, that you communicate a lot about the requirements and the priorities you have for the next days, weeks, and months to come. And then people will start appreciating it, understanding it, and using that data in the end.
Let me sit with that for a second with you. What strategies do you use? Because I think that communicating a roadmap is a difficult thing for any team, whether it's marketing team, product team, data team especially.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific strategy, or can you talk about maybe one struggle that you've had to overcome from your experience when it came to doing this?
Sure. A lot of struggles.
Yeah.
A lot of challenges. I have one very, very simple philosophy, and that is curiosity follows transparency. What do I mean by that? When you create transparency on the data and on the processes, the people in your organization, your employees, will become interested in whatever you're showing. And I had very long discussions with our guys and the guys at Project A, because we introduced the data warehouse a couple of months back, and they were afraid to show crappy data. And I wasn't, because creating that awareness helps you in order to clean up the data. It creates an awareness on the user side where they understand how valuable data is if it's clean. And what they did now is we started the cleanup process, and now the data actually makes sense.
And does everyone in your company now feel a sense of ownership because they went through this process with you, do you think? Maybe.
Well, ownership can be made transparent. And not taking that ownership is very, very visible in all the data that we generate.
Very
so
cool.
Ownership is one thing that derives from that transparency as well.
Florian, from what I understand, you have a very different experience because you come from a company that was a legacy company and wanted to make a transition into more of a data, because Scout24 is an older company, right? They've been around for a while.
Say again?
Scout24 has been in the market for a long time.
I mean, it's a well-grown startup, so to say. It's 20 years old, and
Okay. And before that, you worked at Vodafone.
yeah, exactly.
Do you have any different experience coming from more of a legacy corporate structure than this typical startup Project A style company when it comes to?
I mean, as I say, so when you're in a big corporate, you have the old legacy approach where you have a BI team, and this is mostly the bottleneck because they're producing they're producing analysis and reports. It's mostly in Excel, then sending it out to the company. At Scout, we have a totally different approach. So we focus on a clear self-service strategy, meaning to scale up the whole data-drivenness. We try to enable the whole company to work with data. So this means we first make the data available and as easier available as possible. So for example, we deleted all our Excel reports last year and moved it over to a BI tool, so like Tableau or MicroStrategy, so that the business can get their own data and is not reliant on a BI or analytics team. So the next step is that we try to really enable the business to not only be the end user of Tableau reports or dashboards, but are enabled build their own dashboards based on the data we provide.
And how has the transition been to not only building the tool, but training people how to use it, getting them excited, making them, maybe there's fear, maybe there's a literacy to overcome?
I mean, to be honest, it's not as easy as just introduce it over the night.
Sure.
It's still a struggle, and basically we do two approaches. So the one is, as you just said, inspire the people. So we do data conferences for the whole company, just to show them exciting use cases. We have a AI evangelist who is just promoting and evangelizing AI products. But we also launched a data university. So to offer trainings to the segments, to the PMs, which are tailored to our needs and to their needs. So just to give an example, we launched 10 courses just last month, and we got 300 sign-ups within 2 days.
Okay, so I guess then your approach is first infrastructure, and then you really did put a lot of manpower into this to get people using and using. That's super interesting. I want to go back to this idea of actionable and insights and call on you, Melissa, because something that we do struggle with is quantifying the unquantifiable, right? We have all these different metrics that we want to have data from, but they're hard, right? Like health or happiness or satisfaction. And I know that Blinkist has a huge user base, and from what I understand, you also work with freelancers who actually write the summaries of books.
Yes.
And so you must have a very interesting challenge when it comes to making data out of this whole process and figuring out what do users like better, how satisfied is your freelancer pool, what do you do? What are your strategies for this?
Well, we haven't hacked that entirely. Like, I don't have a perfect solution, but I think what's easier to say is what we avoid doing,
Okay.
like what we figured out is wrong, we refrain from making assumptions. So we refrain from defining happiness and satisfaction on behalf of the user. So if they read more than 5 books in a week, if they do this every month, if they come back, there is no one definition. The next thing is we try to understand the customers. So we try to segment them by their behavior, by their temporal behavior, by their habitual usage, to understand what is a habit, because for everyone it is different. Like, it's a common mistake that companies fall, that they think that their app is in the center of the user's life, that everything evolves around it. It doesn't. Your app is often a proxy to their lifestyle. So, for example, our customers use the app when they are driving to work, or when they're at the gym, or when they are they want to fall asleep and they want to listen to something inspiring. And we know that's where we stand, and we try to understand that, and we try to improve that experience, make it easy for them to make it a part of the life. But again, it always happens in segments. There is no one good use case. There is no one perfect product. Your product needs to be versatile, and it needs to be able to adapt to your main customer segments. So that's basically one of the major things that that we try to look at and try to.
What is one more quality metric that you are having a really hard time quantifying at this moment at Blinkist?
I think it's retention. So everything around retention. What drives retention? And what metrics should we look at when it comes to retention? So if you want to understand satisfaction, you can have a Net Promoter Score survey. There is still means to get there. But if they don't come back, you can't do anything.
Sure.
So that's the biggest mystery.
That's a very common one, I think. Simon, Spryker has an interesting product, because you make B2B e-commerce platforms, right? So your clients are other businesses, but from what I understand, it's very customized. So with every solution being very custom, how do you get a good sense on the overall success of these very quality metrics?
To be very frank, so far we don't. because how our customers are using our product, Commerce Operating System, is they mostly build them up themselves. So what we are providing is just like on your iPhone or on your Samsung phone, we are providing the operating system, and you make sure that all the apps are in place. What we don't measure so far is the usage of each and every single module. However, what we can measure is rather internally, because the way we do sales is in two ways. First one is direct sales. That's fairly easy. But the second one, so don't tell it to our sales guys. It's not that easy. It's very complicated. But the process behind it is a common one. But then there's a second way. And that second way is via our ecosystem. So we have partners in place, and they have to understand Spryker, and they have to sell Spryker, and they are doing that. However, we need to make sure that they are fully equipped, that they are fully enabled, and in those cases, talking to the customers, talking to the partners, and getting their feedback on how well trained are they, how well informed are they on Spryker, how happy their customers are, is a very important metric that we started measuring, and thus we have very good insights in which sales channel performs best, what are best practices, and so on and so on.
Very interesting, kind of operationalizing it. I want to wrap up so that we have time for audience questions, but I want to end with Florian. In your bio for this panel, you use the words mindful leadership. And I think we can take a second to just reflect on our own teams and how we structure our own teams. What does that mean to you, mindful leadership?
That's a quite different question to data. I would say, so in the environment we are working, in a highly volatile environment where organizations are changing quite quickly, is really important to lead from your center and to give confidence to your team so that they can perform as best as they can. So it basically means not just, don't mean to do meditation at the beginning of every meeting, but it means to be like centered in yourself as a leader, to give confidence to your team and also give them a vision and a direction.
Melissa, you're also a team lead. Simon, you are too. Do you have any words about your own strategy as a leader of a data team?
I can only extend from what Florian said. So it's definitely a great start. What we capitalize on is coaching, leading by coaching. And we've always tried to, we've been always practicing this. And I was self-taught to a certain extent, but recently we received some really proper training, and I must say now I'm a huge fan. I've converted entirely, and it's a great style in the sense that it actually focuses on the team leaders empowering their team members to achieve their potential. So it's based on asking questions, not offering them, if I were you, this is what I would do, or when I had this problem, this is how I did it, but rather to lead them to the answers by asking the right questions. And this is actually the only sustainable way of leadership, because if you think about it, if you want to solve everybody's problems for them, then you cannot ever grow. Your team cannot be better than you. Your team is limited by your potential and abilities, and only by coaching you can grow your team sustainably to a certain number. You can still provide them the right support, and they can even use coaching tools to help each other to create more better collaborative work. Of course, because it's a very tight way of supporting your team, it's very personal. You shouldn't have too big of a team, because then it becomes a serialized way of coaching, which also there is no serialized way of coaching. Right team size, leading by asking them the right questions and letting them getting the answers, and investing in the potential they have.
Simon, let's end on you. What's your leadership strategy as the lead of a data team?
I think I can also just add to that. Again, we talked a lot over lunch already. So one of the key insights that we had is it's very, very hard to find really good people in both data engineering as well as in BI. There are two ways to cope with that. Either try to find somebody who is able to jump in, do everything right from the start. That's a very unlikely case. And even if you find that person, you might end up overspending. And so we decided to give people a chance, people that have a great potential and the right attitude in place, and build BI up internally, and just raise that. And what you need to allow in order to do that is you definitely have to use coaching. You have to do that a lot, especially for young people. However, most of the stuff, they are far better than I am, of course.
Yeah.
They've learned it in school. They are digital right from the beginning.
Yeah.
They have an entirely different mindset, and you need to allow that space. You need to give them priorities and a clear guidance, but you also have to be humble enough to know that they are actually better than you are.
It's a good note to end on. Open it for audience questions. Does anybody have any questions for the panelists? If not, I have backups, so it's okay.
There's one question.
First.
I was wondering, how do you determine the right team size at what stage of growth in your company?
How do you determine?
There's an excellent presentation from Philipp Werner and Ole Bosdorf at Project A. In case you don't know what the right team size is, I can actually refer to that presentation. Ask the guys to send it to you. In a nutshell, what to start with when you're a very small company, very early. Start with a business analyst, grow it to 2 business analysts and 1 data engineer, and then scale from there. And I guess Florian's example is quite a good one. Don't grow your team to more than 7 to 8 people, because then it's just very hard to handle.
I think we had another question over here.
Hi, a question for Florian. You mentioned that you use both Tableau and MicroStrategy. Why both tools, and which use cases do you cover with each?
I mean, to be really honest, we only use MicroStrategy, but since only a small portion of people knows MicroStrategy, I say we're using MicroStrategy and Tableau to give you an idea what MicroStrategy is.
Can I just jump in real quick? Florian, you mentioned self-serve analytics. I was just wondering what your opinion from Simon and Melissa are on the basically what Scout24 is trying to do of enabling every employee to make data-driven decisions.
I can go first. Well, the goal there is to basically make more impact with data, right? So you don't want to have blockers in the funnel. And if it takes a long time to get to the insight from the idea, from the question to getting the answer, if it takes a long time, then that's a blocker in the funnel. So self-service BI helps there. It basically, if you don't have self-service BI, then it always comes to the BI team, and BI team becomes the source of the blocker, which should actually be the enabler. So by self-service BI, you let everybody get the answers. But of course, there is limits to it, and there is limits to what every self-service BI tool can provide. Not every deep analysis can be performed by drag and drop. And you need to have a proper data model behind the tool so that when people get wants to get a metric, they don't get different numbers in the end. These all affect the data trust. So it is a tool that can be used definitely very efficiently, but not for all types of analysis, and with proper training and a proper foundation.
Just to extend that a little bit, to me there are 3 levels. The basic and foundational level is the BI team itself, so creating the analytics, creating the data tables, creating the entire complexity, and make sure that the data you have in your data warehouse or data lakes makes sense. Then there's a second layer, which is the evangelist or the allies you have within departments. So for example, a marketing analyst within the marketing department, or somebody in the product management team that is able to understand, interpret the data, and do a couple of analysis themselves. And then there's a third layer, which is the people just consuming data, analyzing data on a level where you can just click, filter, change views. And I guess if you structure your organization in that way, you're both able to provide the insights in a very fast way, and you're able to scale that model to from a company that has 50 to 100 employees up until to the point where you have a couple of thousands.
I mean, one thing to add, so we do the strategy not to free our analysts from all this stupid dashboarding, and to give them the chance to go really deep into the data. So meaning all dashboardings based on a managed metadata layer can be done by the PMs, by the business people, and we analysts go really deep into the data and get to dry out the nuggets.
Okay, so I think all of us agree that we want to make data-driven decisions, but a lot of times there's incomplete data or not enough data to kind of derive significant results. What are your ideas about that topic to still be able to maybe get at least helpful insights, or should you just really try to spend more time on data collecting then?
Someone want to take?
I mean, to give you the academic answer, I would say to be really transparent what you're doing and what you have, so that you get at least an indication of insights based on the data available. And then, of course, try to get reliable data as much as possible. But I mean also 80-20, so.
I guess, sorry, want to go first? I guess what is very important is 2 things. The first one is we had a situation when we created that data warehouse and we built it up, where for a couple of weeks we were not able to maintain reports. So, for example, those partner reports or sales reports for a couple of teams, so we were just able to generate overall sales insights. And what happened is that people, first of all, they got quite scared because they had the imagination that we were flying blind, which was not the case, but we were not able to monitor really on detail. And second, they started to reopen their Excel sheets and just dump data in there and try to make sense of it themselves. And that created quite an interesting discussion, because all of a sudden you had 3 sources of truth, and what we had to do, and that took a little bit of time, is to align them together to create one single source of truth where all people or all employees can agree upon that this is the insights provided. And the second aspect, and that's very important, is you need top management support. You need your MDs to make sure that there's only one source of data you trust. So no analysis, no insights that are shown in a management meeting or in a discussion that do not originate in that single source of truth. And therefore you need a very, very, very high stakeholder buy-in, and you need to make sure that you have your board and your MDs on board.
I can, so Simon mentioned about setting things up at the beginning and getting the data in. Maybe I can add a remark about, like, if you already have some data sources, but some of them are incomplete and you want to make a decision about how to move on. It's essentially getting the data in is just one step in what you want to achieve, right? Eventually you want to have an impact. So let's say that you want to have a impact in terms of revenue, and you are missing some data that will help you have 100% reliable information. Then it's about simple calculation. Like if you are losing 5% of the data, but the rest actually gets you to a point where you are still very efficient in your operations, and the cost of acquiring, like having perfect complete data is much more than what that losing 5% of that is costing you, then maybe you just don't do it. You go with 95% confidence and you work with that data. If it's about entirely getting, importing data from a third-party source, let's say you have a new payment provider and you want to get the data, then in that case, I must give that, this is a rather practical tip that I learned over time, is that connecting to third-party APIs and getting the data is a very repetitive, operational, and no-brainer data engineering task that none of our precious and hardly hired data engineers should do. Like, it's one of those tasks that are easily outsourced. There's a lot of companies that do it well and that do it really well. They keep track of the APIs, they always adjust, so they provide a reliable service, whereas otherwise you would need to provide this level of service internally and do something that everybody else is already like outsourcing. So I can also recommend you to find one of these companies to like just use to see if it helps you. I can give you some names later on if you like.
Do we have time for one more question? One more. We have 2 minutes. Is it a 2-minute question?
You already asked about this roadmap alignment. I just want to hear Melissa's ideas about this as head of BI. So if it's the case for your company and your stakeholders don't have aligned roadmap, so they bombard your team with requests. On the other hand, your team members have so much potential and they think there are other directions you can go. How can you find the balance and maintain your roadmap?
To avoid this, we basically, BI was brought to a position at Blinkist that directly reports to the CEO and is positioned very close to the company's strategy. Because BI can work proactively, can drive strategy, can bring in insights that will basically go as input to the planning of the other divisions, and can also work as reporting the success, if it went well or not. So it can come after something is done, or can basically inform that decision that this needs to be done. And therefore, BI needs to be positioned very close to the strategy. And the moment, like if it happens that divisions are working on things that are not aligned with company strategy, BI should be the one who calls that out and says that, no, we measure our success in the impact that we make, and we think this is a great question, but in the end it's going to be, oh, good to know. Not going to do anything with it because I can't, because that's not the way the company is moving towards. So you just need to call that out.
I think that's it.
Yes, that's it. Thanks a lot. I think this was very interesting. You managed to cover a lot of stuff in 45 minutes. So thanks again to our panelists. Give them a warm applause. Yeah. And enjoy the coffee break.